stealth craft made it back to Sochi all right?
Da. Safe and sound. No repairs necessary. Some routine maintenance and she will be as good as new.
Good to hear. I'm guessing that thing doesn't come cheap.
Well, an old Soviet army friend gave me discount. He runs a PMC specializing in airborne warfare.
An Air Force for hire? That's a new one.
Ever since SOP, Mercs started to fill more and more regular combat duties. SOP ended, but the trend did not. Most every modern military relies on PMC support in one way or another.
Good news for Maverick, I suppose. Anyway, that's quite the little jet your friend has. I was expecting a lot of turbulence coming in that low, but she was smooth as silk. Didn't feel like I was a bird exactly, but probably the next best thing.
The MQ-133C uses a brand new type of active adjustment control system. Sensors on the plane take readings 120 times a second, and to be honest, I don't know how it works. But the crew chief tells me this is what keeps her flying so steady. It is all state-of-the-art technology. There are only 3 of them in the entire world. Even the RQ-133 spy plane she is based on is only 2 years old. It is fitted specially for Cyborg, so maybe demand is a bit low now, but I think that will change soon, eh?
It's funny. Its guts are all bleeding edge, but from the outside, it looks almost retro.
Until recently, stealth aircraft design was focused on radar-absorbing materials and improving aerodynamics. But lately, engineers are trying to use the shape of the craft to do more than improve gas mileage. Maneuverability is a low priority. This kind of plane is not meant for dogfighting, after all.
And we can afford all this? I hate to ask, but will we clear a profit on this op?
You need not worry about such things. But yes, we should be fine. Where the proper equipment can make or break a mission, we should have the best. That miss with the anti-air missile last month was a painful reminder of this lesson.
Ah, yeah. I see what you mean. Looks like a war zone out here.
The palace cleared out quick when Dolzaev's men showed up. The streets got pretty hot after that. We're definitely gonna see a few civilian casualties here. Luckily, it looks like most of them got out of the city before things got bad. They've basically got control of the entire town, and are using the refinery as their HQ.
And that's why we're hitting the plant.
Keep in mind, those cyborgs are contractors. For most of these guys, this is just a job. In theory, once you eliminate their commanding officer, they should scatter pretty quickly.
How we doing, Courtney?
You're looking good on our end. GPS and audio-visual feed coming in fine. Energy consumption? Check. Damage levels? Check. Blood pressure, brain waves, blood sugar? Check, check, check. All this monitoring equipment, I got a better view than if I was standing right next to you. Anyway, I'll be saving all your data automatically anytime something important happens in the field. But contact me anytime you want a manual save.
Copy that. Good to hear that hasn't changed with this new body.
Yep, the basic system's exactly the same. So, did you want to save? And save complete. Simple, huh?
Copy. And glad to hear you're okay after Africa. That ambush was no joke.
Tell me about it. 3 armored vehicles should have been plenty for that job. And it would have been against any typical guerrilla force.
I keep asking myself, where would an anti-Imani faction get the cash to hire cyborgs?
It just doesn't add up. Maybe there's some intel I missed. A lead I should have followed up on. Maybe if I reacted faster, coordinated better. I don't know.
You can't think that way, Courtney. Not in this business. You did everything you could. Put it behind you and move on.
You're right. Thanks.
Raiden, shall we review the capabilities of your new body?
Copy that. Go ahead, Doc.
As we discussed, you've been outfitted with 2 revolutionary new abilities.
Fuel electrolyte absorption and self-repair from C's nanopaste.
Precisely. First, electrolyte absorption. This is simplicity itself. As your HF blade is linked directly to your fuel cells, simply cut into any source of electrolytes. Say, a hostile cyborg made up of CNT muscle fiber. And your fuel cells will recharge on their own. Rather elegant, wouldn't you say?
I would indeed. It's been great so far.
But the repair process is a bit more involved. A bit more messy, you might say. Most military cyborg models store a cache of biotic self-repair nanopaste in their lower abdomen.
So I need to slice them open and use Zandatsu to extract it. Cut and take, in other words.
Correct. Once extracted, you need only to crush this unit in your hand to absorb the repairing agent inside. Keep in mind, it is extremely delicate. If the unit should hit the ground, some paste will surely leak out. It will still repair your body, but less so than if you can retrieve it directly before your foe falls over.
Basically, harvest their organs before their body can even hit the ground.
Rather gruesome, I realize. But then you Americans enjoy a bit of gore, don't you?
I may be a citizen, but I've never really thought of myself as American.
Oh? Well, yes, I suppose I could understand that given your history. But what then? Surely you don't identify as a Liberian?
I don't identify with anyone. No nation, no ethnic group. I'm my own man. Anyway, I seem to recall those gory torture porn movies were pretty popular in Germany, too.
Indeed, indeed. These splatter films are big in Germany, Russia, Japan, everywhere. Well, everywhere except regions afflicted by actual warfare. It all has to do with taming our fears, you know?
Huh?
The desire to feel fear, to taste death, but from a safe distance. These films allow the viewer to delude themselves into thinking they have overcome their fears. This...
Okay, Doc, I got the gist. Let's save the full psych lecture for some other time, though, huh? That thing's fast.
Yes, faster than you, I suspect. In terms of pure speed, at least. But it cannot run circles around you forever. It needs to attack if it wishes to win.
Yeah, and that's probably my best shot.
Duh. Don't bother chasing. Let it come to you. If you can parry its blows, you'll have a chance to counterattack. Watch its movement, and wait for the right moment to parry.
Textbook battle tactics. Got it.
Remember, you can parry even while taking damage. Do not give up just because you are hit.
That thing's fast.
Yes, faster, but it cannot...
Yeah.
Duh. If you can watch it, remember...
I've seen a lot of weird stuff, but this takes the cake.
Well, I'm glad you're entertained. Too bad you're missing all the fun. It's a real party down here.
Sorry, my specialty's cultural studies, not combat scenarios. If you're looking for my brawl, you must be getting pretty desperate.
Good point.
Besides, if you've got time to screw around on the codec, can't be all that bad, right?
We'll see. Okay, back to the party.
Everything okay, Raiden?
Yeah, it's a fascinating foe, but I'm not gonna cut it any slack. We're dealing with terrorists here, and AI or not, it's still aiding and abetting them.
Yeah. Be careful, though. You might want to save your data first. Okay, all set. Good luck.
Didn't you say you'd been here before, Boris?
Once, back when it was still Soviet territory.
Seems like it'd be a lovely place, if it weren't a war zone.
The Pearl of the Black Sea, they called it, back when more Russians lived there. It was a very popular resort spot for the USSR. This is before the wall fell, of course. Then Russia and Georgia began to fight over the area.
Kicking off the war in the early 90s.
Georgia was a Soviet republic. Abkhazia, a semi-autonomous state within it. The Soviets like to stoke ethnic rivalries between the two. And not just there, in all the outlying territories. It kept them easier to control.
But with the Russians no longer watching over the two.
Duh. The Abkhaz were scared. They knew an independent Georgia would swallow their nation sooner or later. So they took advantage of a Georgian military coup to declare their own independence in '92. Of course, the new Georgian government was not happy to hear this, and so...
The same old story.
And with Russia supporting the Abkhaz, it was a stalemate. 2 years later, the ceasefire meant Abkhazia was finally independent, but not officially. They still are not formally recognized by Georgia, or most of the international community.
This region is filled with breakaway states.
This is true. There is South Ossetia, also in Georgia. Transnistria in East Moldova, and Nagorno-Karabakh, which broke from Azerbaijan. In any case, even Russia did not officially recognize Abkhazia as independent until 2008. So it was not long ago Sukhumi was a war zone. It has changed dramatically since then. They have been rebuilding steadily, with Russian support, ever since SLP was shut down.
Good to hear. But doesn't that leave them wrapped around Russia's little finger?
It does. Which is why Dolzaev is calling for a truly independent state. He wants an Abkhazia that takes orders from no one. Not Georgia, not Moscow.
Sounds like a worthy cause.
Duh. But many Abkhaz are happy with the reconstruction Russian support makes possible. Few of his fellow countrymen were interested in what Dolzaev had to say. At first.
And then Desperado showed up.
Exactly. They brought the sad ending to this little history lesson. It is no wonder so many people mistrust PMCs, eh?
I suppose not.
You know, I almost felt sorry for the little guy.
What? That UG? Why? Because it couldn't disobey its orders?
Yeah, that, and I don't know, it didn't seem especially interested in fighting you somehow.
But was it really thinking on its own? Maybe it was all just an act. Get me to second-guess myself.
You could be right. It's just... it didn't seem like just another UG to me. Maybe it's because I'm such a dog lover.
That was no cuddly puppy, Courtney. It was a wolf, and a nasty one at that.
No, I know. You're right. I didn't mean to sound critical. Whatever it was, it attacked you. You had no other choice.
Didn't have much freedom myself, did I?
What was up with that wolf dog UG? Some pretty freaky shit.
Hadn't thought too much about it.
Really? I keep wondering, why give it intelligence if you're not gonna let it think for itself?
Good question.
I mean, I guess it makes sense if it improved combat performance.
Now that you mention it, it didn't fight like your typical UG. It felt more like I was facing off against a cyborg.
Oh. I guess the added smarts make for a tougher opponent after all.
That's not what I mean. It wasn't really tougher than your average UG. More like it was, I don't know, hesitant. It didn't follow through on its attacks either.
Guess that's why it was still just a prototype. But then why put it out on the front lines?
Who knows? Maybe it was the field test. In any case, probably not the result they were hoping for.
A most fascinating opponent, wouldn't you say?
What did you make of it, Doc?
Well, everything it said seems feasible enough. It's true all UGs feature high-level AI these days. Given enough time to adapt and learn, a neural AI could certainly become able to comprehend speech. Then, with the right interface, speech and conversation will be possible.
But what about it having actual intelligence? John Searle disproved the viability of the Turing test back in 1980. In other words, Just because something talks like a person doesn't mean it's really thinking. It could just be following some program designed to make it seem as intelligent as possible.
I'm impressed. You seem quite knowledgeable in this field.
I had a pretty memorable chat with an AI once, about 10 years ago. After that, I did a little reading.
Ah, yes, of course. The Patriot AI. I heard of this.
Was it actually intelligent, or just programmed to pretend? I'm still not sure.
I suppose it depends on how one defines intelligence. For example, many term chess-playing AIs and such as having sectional intelligence. Some in the field believe that sentience or self-confidence. When you ask if this UG had intelligence, I suspect this is more your criteria?
Yeah, of course. Then you could ask, how do you define sentience exactly? And on and on and on.
Indeed. These terms can indicate a wide variety of meanings that perhaps it is less important to ask if the AI was intelligent or not than to ask how did the AI operate. After all, labels are useful only when they further pursuit of, and that, as you well know, is the goal of all science.
Sure, Doc. Doc, that wolf UG, you think it's possible to repair it?
Why do you ask?
Just curious.
Well, normal brain tissue degrades starting approximately 3 minutes after the heart stops. With neural AI, however, the spin of the internal electrons is retained even after electric power is cut. Assuming there is no damage to the actual AI hardware itself, yes, repairs should be possible.
Okay.
Whatever state it is in, I would certainly appreciate it if you could bring it back with you.
I'll see what I can do, but the mission takes priority.
Of course. I would never suggest otherwise.
But let's just say this thing is what it claimed to be. You think there are other intelligent UGs out there? Because if that's the case, I've got a feeling future missions are only gonna get rougher.
Indeed. Dozens of UGs chatting away on the field would be enough to drive anyone to distraction. Neural AIs are not von Neumann computers, keep in mind. Structurally, they are closer to human brains. Hardware and software are indivisible. The learning data can't simply be transplanted to other AIs.
So it can't be copied or backed up either.
Normal UGs must be taught individually. This entails streaming provisional, audiovisual, and body sensor data until it's ready to be shipped out. This process can be sped up by increasing and improving processing speed. But I have no data on how long it would take to train such an AI how to converse. I couldn't even tell you if there's a training program established for such a thing in the first place. If it is indeed a prototype, it likely learned and honed its skills via the process of trial and error.
So it's unique.
I cannot say with certainty, but I have not heard of any UG like this before. I would imagine that it was telling the truth when it called itself an experimental prototype. There may be others. Or perhaps it's the only one in existence.
Glad we narrowed that down then.
My apologies, Raiden. I realize we never concluded our discussion on carbon net. See as previous, but these pigs
They
preserved as an answer, of course.
Long
do not
copy.
Who actually owns this plant?
On the books, a private abgas firm. In reality, the Russian state.
So all the money goes right back to Russia?
It does provide Abkhazia with fuel and electricity, but yes, it was clearly built for Russian interests.
How do you mean?
The Caspian Sea is a major source of gas and oil, but these days most of it never passes through Russia. Not since the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipeline was built. With it, the oil flows straight to Europe.
But that pipeline runs straight through Georgia. Why did the Georgian government allow it?
Money, of course, and power. Having a major pipeline run through your land brings plenty of both. The South Ossetia War taught Georgia they could not always rely on the West for support. They began working more with their neighbors in the region to build their own power base.
So Georgia stands to gain from this coup?
It would seem this way. Any scenario that ends with the refinery no longer under Russian control is good for Georgia. Even if they do not retake Abkhazia outright, they benefit if new regime is more friendly to Georgia. Perhaps this is Dolzaev's idea, to attract Abkhaz political leaders with a pro-Georgia agenda.
And that's why Georgia isn't taking action?
I very much doubt Georgian government would be involved in anything so obvious and so reckless. There must be someone else behind all this.
And Dolzaev's just playing along? Why would he?
Revenge, Tovarich. Anything to hurt Russia. Perhaps money as well, who knows?
Yeah, the Russians can't be happy about all this. Let me guess. They contacted you through the FSB, right?
There were conversations, yes. But it was the Abkhaz government that enlisted us. We only took this mission because we knew it would help the people there. Besides, we cannot leave Desperado unchecked. Not after what happened.
Right. I won't let them profit from this mess. And we need to learn who's backing them.
Duh. And the first step to do this is take back that refinery.
Boris, do we have anything else on Dolzaev? Any more on his background?
Very little confirmed intel, but it seems he is a former Chechen insurgent. He claims he was part of the Chechen National Congress when they declared independence in '91. This was just after the famous coup attempt in Moscow in August. Things were not stable. Gorbachev lost his political power. It was Yeltsin who signed the Belavezha Accords.
Right. It created the Commonwealth of Independent States. All republics that made up the USSR became independent.
The problem is, Chechnya was never a true republic. It was an autonomous state, but still part of the Russian Republic.
Like how Abkhazia was an autonomous state within the Georgian Republic.
Duh. The same kind of sad story. Russia does not recognize Chechnya as independent. They send troops and the fighting begins. It is said 250,000 Chechens were killed over the 2 wars that followed. 1/4 the entire population. The Chechens were forced to give in, and the war officially ended.
But the rebels kept on fighting.
Insurgents fled into Caucasus Mountains, formed several factions. They waged guerrilla war on Russia ever since. We think Dolzaev is the leader of just such a rebel group.
Sounds like Russia bears some of the blame for radicalizing him and his men.
I love my homeland, but she is not perfect. What nation is? Just remember, this could all be smoke. We cannot even confirm Dolzaev is truly ethnic Chechen.
Say he is, though. What would he be after here in Abkhazia?
Some Chechen militants volunteered to fight for the Abkhaz in their war in the early 90s. But when Russia recognized Abkhazia to keep Georgia in check, they also began funding recovery.
Which the Dolzaev crowd see as a play to gain influence. But wasn't the Chechen recovery funded by Russia?
Duh. And many rebels believe this is why their people gave up on independence. Perhaps this is exactly why Dolzaev is here, to alert the people before it can happen again. But if the Abkhaz people are not interested in fighting, his plan could backfire.
So in a way, it's Russian policy that brought him here. He thinks he's fighting to make these people free.
Whatever his motives, no one elected him and no one gave him a permit for murder. Now that he is allied with Desperado, he is too dangerous to ignore.
Boris, any idea where they're getting the money to fund this operation? Assembling this many cyborgs can't come cheap. Not to mention getting them all here.
There are 2 questions we have about the money. Is Dolzaev paying Desperado out of his own pocket?
And if not, then who is?
Duh. We do not know size of Dolzaev's war chest, only that he has some funding. Insurgent does not always mean the dirt-poor guerrilla with the hunting rifle and homemade bomb. Some rebel groups are very well funded. In Arab oil nations, for instance.
Right. They have benefactors who share the same ideology.
There is also a chance some other party is backing Desperado directly, creating conflict for their own reasons, like the Patriots used to. Many groups stand to profit from wars, yes? Not just PMCs. Arms maker, contractor. Perhaps it is this kind of corporation behind him.
The oil interests alone could make billions here.
Duh. Already this violence so near the Abkhazia-Sochi pipeline is affecting markets. An interruption in the pipeline would shift the balance of power between the world's oil giants. Whether it's Dolzaev's goal or no, many groups stand to gain a lot of money from this mess. Raiden, I've been thinking. What Sundowner said. How peace in Africa was a problem for him. Do you remember?
Yeah. Doesn't sound like somebody fighting for an anti-Umani faction, does it? The Prime Minister definitely had his detractors. Anyone in that position would. But he listened to them, treated them fairly. There was no real injustice for the opposition to rally around, so the rival factions never got that popular or that well-funded. There's no way they could afford all this.
But it does not make sense for Desperado to be acting alone here either. Even if they trigger full-blown war, there is no guarantee they would get the contract. Perhaps this is about natural resources? The last civil war was over precious metals.
You think big business hired Desperado to shake things up?
Who can say? At least it has not grown into a real civil war. Yet.
We need to figure out who's at the root of all this if we're gonna end it.
But knowing is only half the battle. It is the other half that will get you killed.
Well, no matter what, this mission has a nice side benefit. Putting a dent in Desperado will screw whoever's backing them, too.
Our focus is to help the Abkhaz people. But if we hurt those responsible for this on the way, well, so be it.
Hey, Boris, I know this probably isn't the best time for this, but...
No problem. Ask me anything. My goal is to have open company, hiding nothing from its employees.
Right, well, there were a few big proposals we had in the works, right?
What do you mean?
You know, my doing tactical drills with the Brazilian Special Ops Force in Rio, playing the bad guys in that South African anti-terror police training program, on-site security consulting for the Swiss.
Yes, we were working on a few things, weren't we?
Well, I thought so, but they're not in Maverick's task management database.
Well, right then. We've had to freeze those proposals. Temporarily, you see?
You're putting them on ice?
They would be too much distracting for you. We need to focus on current op.
That doesn't seem necessary. You're gonna disappoint a lot of prospective clients.
Well, yes, but...
This is about Umani, isn't it?
I should not have tried to hide it.
Right. Open company, remember?
Well, yes, but we can't afford for you to be too shaken to complete your mission.
Boris, I'm fine. I know it's not all my fault, but my client was killed. Kinda expect to lose some work after that.
Yeah, not your fault, but my responsibility in the end. We were far too lightly equipped. No one on the field made mistakes.
It's a third world country. We were working with a shoestring budget. If we went in heavier, burning Maverick cash, we'd have been in the red.
And that is the tricky part about this business, yes? But what is past, and too early to worry about the future. Just focus on the matter at hand.
Okay. We got anything on that ray I went up against?
We analyzed the wreckage. Its musculature had been replaced with CNT muscle fiber. The same type as you, or most any cyborg. This improved its power output and left more room in the chassis for other equipment. It seems they filled this space with Vetronics and extra weapons.
Like that heat blade and plasma gun. Plasma loses effectiveness in the air pretty quickly, but it's still a hell of a close-range weapon.
Large-scale UGs have a growing problem fighting smaller, more agile opponents like you, Raiden. This is why we now see UGs armed with new countermeasures, such as this Ray had.
So who actually owns this plant?
On the books, a private Abkhaz firm. In reality, the Russian state.
So all the money goes right back to Russia?
It does provide Abkhazia with fuel and electricity, but yes, it was clearly built for Russian interests.
How do you mean?
The Caspian Sea is a major source of gas and oil, but these days most of it never passes through Russia. Not since the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipeline was built. With it, the oil flows straight to Europe.
But that pipeline runs straight through Georgia. Why did the Georgian government allow it?
Money, of course, and power. Having a major pipeline run through your land brings plenty of both. The South Ossetia War taught Georgia they could not always rely on the West for support. They began working more with their neighbors in the region to build their own power base.
So Georgia stands to gain from this coup?
It would seem this way. Any scenario that ends with the refinery no longer under Russian control is good for Georgia. Even if they do not retake Abkhazia outright, they benefit if new regime is more friendly to Georgia. Perhaps this is Dolzaev's idea, to attract Abkhaz political leaders with a pro-Georgia agenda.
And that's why Georgia isn't taking action?
I very much doubt Georgian government would be involved in anything so obvious and so reckless. There must be someone else behind all this.
And Dolzaev's just playing along? Why would he?
Revenge, Tovarich. Anything to hurt Russia. Perhaps money as well.
Yeah, let me get.
There we all decide.
Right.
Da. And
So who actually owns this
on the books, a private Abkhaz firm.
So all the money goes right back to Russia?
It does.
How do you...
The gas, not since the back.
But that pipeline...
Money, of course. The South.
So
Da. Any sooner, perhaps.
And that's...
I very... There must...
And don't...
Perhaps.
Yeah, let me get.
There were... We all decide.
Right.
Da.
You get all that, Kev? The woman with Dolzaev. That's Mistral?
Yep, the only female member of the Winds of Destruction. The name is from a cold, dry regional wind in France that blows from the Alps down to the Mediterranean.
She French?
Yep, born in Algeria, though. It was a French colony until they declared independence in the early 60s. Haha, but you already knew that.
Yeah, they were the last French colony in Africa.
You know your history. Plenty of French colonial families still live there. Billets noirs, they're called.
I've heard the term. The main character in that Camus novel, The Stranger, was one.
You also find a lot of Algerians who've immigrated to France, although they put a stop to that a while ago.
Yeah, a lot of European countries seem to be clamping down on immigration lately.
Mistral joined the Foreign Legion to get her citizenship.
A woman legionnaire?
And not the first. There was one that served in the North Africa campaign during World War II. Anyway, Mistral's been doing PMC work ever since her Legion discharge. We're not sure why she went cyborg. She's officially leading the force at the refinery, but she is also a combatant. Don't have anything on her combat style, but do not underestimate her. The Winds of Destruction are trained killers, all of them. They didn't let her in because of her looks.
I don't need a reminder. I won't let my guard down.
Yeah, but, speaking of her looks, she's got, well, I mean, a couple of, huge... Look, just don't get distracted, okay?
Sounds like you should take your own advice there, Kev. So, Kev, what exactly goes on here, anyway? I mean, obviously refining oil, but what else involved with that? How careful do I need to be?
Skip that week in science class, huh? All right, how much do you know already?
Just the basics. They take crude and refine it into gas and stuff. Other usable fuels, right?
Well, yeah, and stuff. Kerosene, liquefied petroleum gas, naphtha, jet fuel.
Naphtha?
The raw material for ethylene, which is then the raw material for polyethylene and other plastics. Crude oil's used for a lot more than just fuel, you know. These days, it's the core component of just about every chemical product.
Okay.
Crude contains a lot of molecular hydrocarbons and impurities. The refinery distills and extracts these hydrocarbons at their different boiling points. Once the impurities are removed, what's left can be used to make gasoline and so on.
Right. So, pretty much exactly what I said in the first place.
Oh, well, if you know all this already, I guess we're done here.
I could use a bit more detail on...
All right, cool then. Kevin out.
Hey, so, Kev, buddy, about the refinery. Can I get a quick breakdown of the facilities?
Copy that. I suppose you should at least know a few basics for the mission. So, like I was saying, the refining process is based around distillation. The tallest building on site is the distillation tower. All the crude oil runs through there first, where it's distilled at different boiling ranges. Lighter components with low boiling points are removed at the top of the tower, heavier ones at the base. The heaviest fuel oil then has the lighter oils and naphtha that distillation didn't remove taken out. Fluid catalytic cracking is what they call it. Other than that, let's see. There's equipment to remove sulfur, a cooling tower to dispose of all the water used. Oh, and the flare stack to eliminate gas waste. You see that thing with flames shooting out the top? That's the stack.
It's burning the gas off?
Yeah, burns it up completely, rendering it harmless. Kinda hypnotic if you stare at it a while, huh? Next door you have a power plant. It's pretty typical for this type of facility. And of course the gas tanks. Liquefied petroleum gas, LPG, is pressurized and stored in those round tanks. It's also artificial, but it's got a certain charm, you know? Like the ultimate in utilitarian beauty. A solitary distillation tower, all lit up and set against the setting sun. It's an amazing sight.
Kev, you still with me there?
What? You don't appreciate this kind of stuff? Places like Germany and Japan, people get really into it. Factory sightseeing tours and everything.
Yeah. No, not so much.
Right. FYI, we just confirmed with the client for your next mission.
Great. How about we finish this one first, though? I'd like to see my family again someday, you know? My son's going to forget he even has a father.
90-day contracting tour, buddy. We're all in the same boat. Man, feels like ages since I was back in Virginia.
I don't know about in the same boat. These guys are out to tear me limb from limb. Worst you our EMF desk jockeys have to worry about are paper cuts.
All right. Guess you don't want to hear what your old friends are up to then.
Who is it?
Desperado.
Where is it this time?
Mexico. Apparently they've got some kind of lab in Guadalajara. You're going in to investigate claims of human trafficking and illegal dumping.
And our client? Who's picking up the tab? If we're planning to play police all of a sudden, we're gonna need some kind of budget.
No worries there. It's a human rights group we've worked with a few times before. They were conducting their own trafficking investigation when Desperado came up.
Understood. You can brief me when I get back.
Roger that.
One thing I don't understand, Kev. Desperado must be violating all kinds of laws here. Why hasn't the international community gotten involved?
Well, from a purely legal standpoint, it's actually not so cut and dry. First, there's the fact that Abkhazia is still not a member of the UN. Only Russia and a few other breakaway states even recognize it as a sovereign nation. In the eyes of most of the international community, Abkhazia is technically still part of Georgia, which would make this an internal Georgian issue.
Guess you can't really call it a coup if the displaced government was never seen as legitimate.
Exactly. And even if everyone agrees it was a coup, it can be tough to tell which regime is more legit. Sometimes you'll see the military topple a dictator and establish a provisionary government, for example. Now, if they confirmed atrocities were taking place, the UN could deploy troops, recognize government or not.
Yeah, but they learned their lesson in Somalia.
Right. Ever since then, they've been a lot more reluctant to get involved in civil wars.
So what about the US and Russia? What's their take on all this?
Well, America was never very friendly with Abkhazia or South Ossetia in the first place. And the Georgian government's a regional ally, so the US really has no cause to intervene. Russia wants the old government back, of course. The regime open to their influence. I doubt they'll opt for any large-scale action. Tensions with Georgia are running high already. But you can bet your ass they won't just sit on the sidelines. Boris has got a lot of connections in the Russian bureaucracy. Ex-military buddies. The Abkhaz are officially our clients, but I'm sure it's Russia that chose us. Maybe footing the bill, too. They can't use their actual special forces, so they call us instead. That's the beauty of PMCs.
We're not bound by the same rules as state-sponsored military.
Other countries would be outraged if the Russians went into places we can go freely. From our side, no state to answer to means we can run things as we see fit. By our own code, no compromises.
Then again, there's no one to say our code is what's right.
True. And opinions on that change from person to person, situation to situation. But you let your moral compass waver at all in this business, and real people pay the price. Money's always a factor, of course, but when it becomes the factor, that's when you got problems. The Montreux document lays out guidelines for what PMCs can and can't do, but there's no way to enforce it. A lot of people see that as the fatal flaw of the entire industry. After all, that's how we end up with rogue outfits like Desperado. Then again, it's also what leaves Maverick free to go after them. The industry has a bad rep, but it isn't good or bad itself. It's up to the morals of those who work in it. All we can do is what we think is right and try to lead by example. Anyway, sorry, you know how I am about this stuff. I'll get off my soapbox now.
Don't apologize. That's exactly why we took this job. Taking Sakumi back is the right thing to do.
Agreed. And now, That's all up to you, buddy.
We always talk about the Montreux document, but why hasn't anyone made it legally binding?
People are trying to, both inside and outside the industry, but it's easier said than done. Even with 17 countries on board, it's still just a set of guidelines. They'd need to negotiate an actual treaty based on that agreement for it to become official. And we both know getting everyone to sign on wouldn't be easy.
Yeah. Every government's for regulating PMCs until it restricts how they can use them themselves.
It gets complicated when you try to put it all in exact legal terms, too. A treaty would need to distinguish a PMC's home nation, the one it's active in, and the one that contracted it. Then you have the industry itself, which isn't exactly thrilled at the prospect of greater regulation. There's just so many different parties involved, and everyone's got their own motivations. So yeah, long story short, we're a long way from getting anything legally binding anytime soon.
Sorry I asked.
Hey, Kev, that piece of shit who killed Enmani, is he one of those almighty winds?
Yeah. Goes by Sundowner. It's a folk name for this warm air current in Southern California. He's also, well, not the formal head of Desperado, but pretty much their de facto leader. Let's see. Born in Alabama, family was poor. Solid student, decent grades, but no money for college, so he joined the army. Says he fought in Panama in '89, then Iraq again, Afghanistan. In 2008, he drops out of the service and starts doing merc work for various PMCs. He was active all through the SOP years. Built up quite a reputation. Apparently, the Sundowner handle comes from all the blood he leaves behind. Looks like the sunset. Anyway, an IED put him out of action for a few years. But then, cyborg tech brought him out of retirement. The Army investigated him for possible war crimes. A few times, looks like. Desecrating remains, torturing POWs, some wrongful deaths. No convictions, though.
Pretty rosy past, huh? Not that I'm one to talk.
Hey, come on, buddy. You know that's not fair. You were just a kid. You didn't know what you were doing. And it's not like they gave you a choice.
Yeah. Thanks, Kev. Kev, you dig up anything more on Jetstream Sam?
Yeah, actually a bit. Still a lot of missing pieces.
I'll take what I can.
Right. Full name, Samuel Rodriguez. Born in Brazil, so I guess that'd be more like Samuel Rodriguez. He's actually not one of the Winds of Destruction. He's not even a Desperado employee.
Yeah. Didn't seem like your typical PMC to me.
His father ran a Brazilian Kenjutsu dojo.
Genjutsu. That's a school of Japanese swordplay.
A lot of Japanese immigrated to Brazil way back when. They brought martial arts with them. Those evolved and became their own offshoots. You've heard of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, right? It's their variation on Judo. Brazilian Kenjutsu's the same kind of thing. A different evolution of the old samurai sword skills. Bit of capoeira and some other stuff mixed in. Anyway, I did some digging. Apparently, the Rodriguez dojo was a big proponent of the Uridachi style.
Uridachi, a.k.a. Setsujinken, the murdering sword. Basically the polar opposite of my sword of justice.
Rodriguez Kenjutsu uses kicks, sword butts, even throws. Unpredictable and very deadly. Anyway, this is interesting. Sam's father was killed by one of his pupils. There were rumors one of the cartels was involved, but it's not clear how or why. And after that, Sam disappears for a while, then comes back, kills the guy who killed his dad, and leaves Brazil. He travels the world for a while, taking odd jobs, bodyguard, cleaner for the mob, etc., etc. Made a big name for himself in the criminal underworld, especially in Central and South America. One story has Sam taking out a mafia hit squad, 10 men, all with assault rifles, using only his sword.
Not unheard of for a cyborg.
This was back in the early 2000s.
Come on. He did that without enhancements? And pre-SOP?
That's the story anyway. And he's a cyborg now, so he could only be stronger. Not to freak you out or anything.
I told you, Kev. I got a reading on his fighting style from last time, and my body's been upgraded. I'll be fine.
Yeah. Oh, I know you will be.
Hey, Kev. You have anything on that sword Sam was using? Didn't seem like your garden variety high-frequency blade.
It's not. It's a samurai sword, the real deal. 16th century make, handed down in his family ever since. Sam had it recast as a high-frequency blade. Doesn't say by who.
Is this something I need to worry about?
Maybe. You know the basics of sword making, right? The harder the metal, the better it cuts, but also the more brittle it is. So a sword's gotta be sturdy, but also just pliable enough to absorb shock without breaking. Walking that line, striking that balance, that's what makes sword crafting an art. Japanese swords fuse different types of iron, each with different amounts of carbon. Different levels of flexibility, in other words, so the blade can be tough and razor sharp.
And that gets multiplied when the sword gets the HF treatment?
Yeah. Basically, the high-frequency upgrade sets the blade vibrating really, really fast, right? That vibration acts on the electron shells of atoms in the sword and the local electromagnetic field. When the EMF achieves resonance, the blade's bonding is strengthened. At a quantum level, it's like the entire sword is made up of the exact same particle type. It also disrupts any atoms it comes into contact with. Say, those that make up the target. Their electron clouds shrink from exposure to quantum decoherence at the Planck scale. In other words, it electrically severs the bonds that keep the target's atoms together.
You lost me around the EMF part.
And that's the dumbed-down explanation. To be honest, even I don't understand all the details. Point is, an HF upgrade is like an amplifier. It multiplies what's already there. So Sam's badass blade might give him the edge. I mean, you know what I mean.
The original sword was really that good?
Sounds like it. Says here it's a Murasama blade.
Murasama. Sounds familiar.
One of the top 10 best-known sword makers worldwide, easy. In Japan, he is legendary. They say his swords thirst for blood, that they choose who will wield them, you know, that sort of thing.
Ooh, now I really am scared.
I know, right?
Where the hell did Desperado get all these cyborgs anyway, Kev?
Hard to say. They're not as rare as they once were, but still. Of all registered PMC troops, we're still talking, what, 3% have enhancements? Maybe 5% tops. Mostly military who got hurt on the battlefield one way or another. Getting their arms or legs back lets them keep earning a living. But most able-bodied soldiers are still reluctant to sacrifice their own healthy body parts. Plus, the surgery is highly specialized. Expensive as hell. Not to mention maintenance costs after that. Unless insurance is footing the bill, most guys couldn't afford enhancements even if they wanted to.
Maverick's got some cyborgs. What's their story? They all wounded in action?
Mostly. I heard a few saved up and paid for it themselves, but just a few. There is this one crazy blonde guy, though. I heard he asked for a full body conversion.
The Patriots didn't leave me much of a body to begin with. I just had Herr Doctor finish what they started.
You know I'm just giving you shit, man. Anyway, yeah. Looking at the numbers, cyborg soldiers are still a pretty small minority. Not really surprising when only contractors in developed countries are offered insurance. Third world soldiers get hurt out on the field, and that's all she wrote. They can't work as a merc anymore. Most times, they can't really work at all.
Well, Desperado's up to something, because cyborgs are definitely not in the minority here.
I've heard of some PMCs covering the cost of the surgery for their disabled. The mercs get their career back, sure, but the PMCs aren't exactly running a charity. These guys have to work to pay it off until the company at least breaks even on them. Any cyborg breaks his contract early would probably be in debt for the rest of his life.
You think that's Desperado's MO?
I can't prove it, but sure as hell wouldn't surprise me.
So what kind of deal does Maverick offer its contractors?
Oh yeah, I forgot you're full-time too. You never contracted with us?
Nope. Boris invited me on board the first time we talked about it. We've known each other since Area 51. Didn't have any reason to turn him down, so yeah. Never really considered the contract route.
Right. Well, it's actually pretty rare for guys on the ground like you to be full-timers. Most of Maverick soldiers are contractors, just like with any other PMC. It just makes sense. After all, it's never the same job twice in this business. Each mission has its own requirements. Force size, skill set, all that crap. So generally, We contract out on a per-mission basis, or a fixed schedule for longer jobs. A lot of US companies are doing it that way lately, not just PMCs. Besides, a good contractor can earn more than most regular full-time employees. Definitely a hell of a lot more than regular military.
And if they want to quit, can they get out of their contract?
Yep. Of course, just up and quitting right in the middle of a mission would cause problems. Just like any other job, you know? We'd want some notice to settle on a new end date, but hold up. You're not thinking of leaving us, are you?
Just curious. You still busy with all that other work, Kev?
You know me, man. Kev of all trades. I got a lot on my plate. Briefing prep, arms procurement, client negotiation, HR, biz dev, accounting, you name it. Lately, though, I've been focusing more on sales and on-site coordination. Oh, and advisor work like this.
Never sleep, do you?
Things have been better since Courtney joined up, at least.
You still busy with all that other work, Kev?
You know me, briefing prep. Lately, though...
Never sleep.
Right. You need to save?
Did you catch all that? With Dolzaev and Mistral?
Yeah, I was monitoring the whole time. Dolzaev's not really what I expected. I've seen his file, plenty of photos, but I guess I expected someone more, I don't know, threatening?
Didn't seem too friendly to me.
No, I mean, you hear terrorist, you think of some cold, calculating professional. Dolzaev looks more like some guy off the street.
Cold, calculating professional types don't usually bother with terrorism. It's too risky. Most terrorists are ordinary people, radicalized one way or another.
Yeah, I guess so.
Of course, that doesn't make what they do any easier to forgive. What about Mistral? What'd you think?
Well, she's certainly attractive. Probably an artificial face, though. I'm guessing most of her is artificial.
Roger that.
So Mistral's from Algeria. Have you ever been?
No. You?
Once, for a consulting job. Pretty short trip, though.
I hear it's pretty safe there now, compared to how things were at the start of this decade.
Yeah, I was able to slip a little sightseeing in. Pretty nice spot for a vacation. Kind of hot, though. 80% of it's the Saharan desert, and wow, it was just like you'd imagine. So much sand. You could easily imagine camel caravans trekking beneath the early evening moon. It was like something from another world.
Yeah? I thought only a sixth of the Sahara was sandy like that. The French carried out a bunch of nuclear tests there too, I remember.
But once you reach the Mediterranean coast, it's a totally different place. All these white-walled buildings framed against intense blue sea. It's a really stark contrast.
Were you in Algiers? I know that the capital looks a lot like that.
Yep. The local cuisine's totally French-influenced. I'll never forget this one lunch near my hotel. A baguette sandwich and a café au lait. Simple and simply unforgettable. Oh, there were a bunch of sweet shops in town too. High-quality European candy, but so cheap.
Sounds like you ate your way across the country.
Well, food's an important part of local culture, you know. Oh, and speaking of which, the seafood. I didn't expect to see Mediterranean fish in African cuisine, but it was also fresh and flavorful. They'd fry up small fish whole, then drizzle them with lemon juice. I could have eaten that all day.
Sounds like a lot of calories.
I tried to stay active, you know.
Hey, did you know my visual analyzers can tell me how much someone weighs?
Yeah, I'll have to talk with Doc about disabling that one. Copy that. Later then?
Yeah. You know, our last chat got me thinking about all the problems with PMCs.
Oh? You come up with a solution to all our industry's ills then?
Yeah. Let's just change the acronym.
That's your solution? Just change the name and change the reputation, eh? To what? I know you like private security provider, but that'd be PSP. Private military security? PMS?
Well, the Montreux document uses PMSC, right? Private Military and Security Company. A bit more comprehensive. And a bit more awkward too, I guess. Seems like it never really caught on.
Yeah, we only use PMSC on contracts, or when we're specifically excluding older-style PMCs.
I guess once a name sticks, that's it. Old habits are hard to break.
Right. Besides, I think we're past the point that a name change would do much for the industry's image.
I get your point. Though it did work once before. We don't call them mercenaries anymore, do we?
By the way, Raiden, we're not picking up any EXIF codes here either. They're all unaffiliated.
Makes sense. We're enemies. Desperado's EXIF code won't match ours, and vice versa. How much do you know about how EXIF works?
Not much. Just that it comes up as a positive match for friendlies and unaffiliated for anyone else.
Which could be friendlies or neutrals not broadcasting the same code for some reason. Say a damaged transmitter or signal interference. But 99 times out of 100, yeah, it's an enemy. EXIF is based on the IFF radio system aircraft use. Stands for Expanded Identification Friend or Foe.
Too bad it only actively IDs friends and not enemies. But I guess asking troops to broadcast, "Hey, enemy here, kill me," would be a bit much.
Telling friends and enemies apart was always a problem in the air, but it's gotten tricky on the ground too. Especially in the War on Terror, with all these PMCs and multinational forces mixing together. The US Army experimented with infrared patches to ID allies. They'd show up in night vision.
Then SOP came along and offered a more efficient method?
Right. SOP's gone now, but its ID protocol is still used all over. ID chips and dog tags, transponders required on all vehicles, aircraft, UGs, cyborgs, you name it.
But if everyone's using the same basic system, how do armies hide their info from the enemy?
Heavy-duty encryption for one. The chips also use a hybrid cross-spectrum system to transmit the data. Without the proper key, it's hard to pick up the signal in the first place. PMCs typically only share their codes with nations or other PMCs they're working with.
What happens if they end up on different sides later, like in a separate conflict?
They just generate a new code and encryption key. The point is, EXIF is required on all combat units, but it's pretty easy to hide the signal.
And 99 times out of 100, unaffiliated means it's a hostile?
Right. Just like with IFF and aircraft. You're a quick study, Courtney.
Nice history lesson, Teach. Now, if you're done, I think you have a nation to save.
Just a little on-the-job training, Kev. Riding out.
Hey, Courtney. Have you ever tried Abkhazian cuisine?
Georgian, yes, but, I don't really know much about Abkhazia, so it'd be nice to try it, though, since we're this close and all.
Huh. Even you haven't tried it? Now I'm really curious.
What do you mean, even me?
Well, before we head to any new country, you always hit up local spots that serve their cuisine, right? You know, your little research trips.
Oh, come on. Not always. I just think it's interesting to compare local interpretations of ethnic food to the real thing. Plus, it's a great way to get familiar with a big part of any nation's culture. That's all.
Okay. But no time for research this time around, huh?
Well, like I said, I've had Georgian food before. And most of the Eastern Bloc sees Abkhazia as just another part of Georgia. But yeah, really tasty. They had this incredible cheese bread. Ugh, and the wine.
Georgian wine is famous after all, though I hear you won't find it in Russia.
They say most Abkhazian cuisine is closer to Turkish food than what you'll find in the rest of Georgia. Apparently only their wine resembles what they serve in Georgia.
How are things back at Control, Courtney?
Things? Things are fine. Same as usual, I guess. Russia is, Russia. Not that I've left HQ much to see anything, really.
No concerns about security? Isn't that a civilian airport you're stationed at?
Sochi International, yeah. But we're fine. We have our own cyborg detail on the job. Plus, any trouble and we can just take off. Literally. One of the perks of housing your HQ in a giant transport plane, I guess. Now, if anyone wanted to mess up this op, they'd have a much easier time coming after you directly.
I'm not so sure. Have you seen this new body in action? It's amazing. It's ready for anything. Unless they...
Oh, Raiden, yeah. Your body? It's so amazing.
Very funny. Yeah, you know what I meant.
Oh, is it getting hot in here? Or is that just your body in action?
All right. If you're done, I'm going to get back to the mission.
Okay, I'll stop.
Thanks.
For a guy with a bod like yours, anytime. By the way, I picked up something interesting on that tilt rotor back in Africa.
Desperado's getaway vehicle? What do you got?
I traced its registration. It comes up as a, get this, mail transport, a Somali civilian helicopter.
Not even the right type of aircraft. So the registration is fake. Well, par for the course for Desperado, I guess.
I wonder why they bothered with the tilt rotor in the first place.
Why not? They can take off and land without an airstrip, virtually anywhere. Hover, too. Meanwhile, they have the speed and range of a fixed-wing plane, or close to it. And they're quiet. You don't get all that BVI noise from the blades like with a normal copter.
Aren't they more accident-prone, though?
They were. Used to call them Widowmakers. The rotor tech is really complex. There've been a lot of mishaps over the years, but each one's helped perfect the design. These days, they're as safe as any other aircraft, helicopter or fixed wing. Most of VTOL's bad rep is left over from the thrust vectoring jets of the past.
Ah, no wonder you know all this. Says here you took down a Harrier once. Wait, by yourself?
Well, I did have a rocket launcher. Wasn't so tough while it was in hover mode.
I bet you're just being modest. Must have been a pretty crazy op you were on.
You don't know the half of it.
Raiden, what you said before about your sword being a tool of justice, I just want to say I agree 100%. I wish all PMCs thought that way.
Glad to hear you say that.
You mentioned it was part of some samurai code?
Yeah. I didn't grow up using a sword. I fell into it by chance, during a mission. After that, I decided to train with the HF blade. I studied a lot of samurai techniques. I really got into it. Started learning more and more about ancient Japan and the samurai code. I tore through stacks of books, movies, anything I could get my hands on.
Somehow hard to imagine you settling in with a big bucket of popcorn.
What? A cyborg can't have hobbies? I'll have you know I'm actually a huge movie buff.
Okay. So that's where you picked up this Sword of Justice creed?
Yeah. Most of it from a single master named Munenori Yagyu. He founded a school of swordsmanship on the idea that violence can be necessary for the greater good. He called it Katsujinken, the life-giving sword. Yagyu believed power isn't evil in itself. It's how it's applied that matters. As time went on, Katsujinken incorporated deterrence. It took on the meaning of winning without fighting. Or as I like to say, one sword keeps another in the sheath. That's from George Herbert. He was an English priest, 17th century, almost the same era as Yagyu.
Huh. It's a universal idea, I guess.
You could frame the same message as use of a necessary evil. But I think it's a good mindset for any PMC.
At least as long as there's fighting that requires us in the first place.
Which doesn't seem likely to change anytime soon.
You know, I have to hand it to you guys. Cyborgs are just amazing to me. So much power and speed.
It's not all gravy.
No? How so?
Well, things have improved a lot in the past few years. But back when I was modded for the first time, keeping artificial blood free of impurities was a huge hassle. Artificial muscles need a constant flow of oxygen from a blood source, just like the real thing. But it was a challenge getting the kidney units as small as they needed to be. We all had to undergo routine dialysis.
Sounds rough.
Used to be even worse back when Dr. Clark was still experimenting. Bad nerve connections would screw with the test subject's pain receptors. It was torture. Compared to that, I had it pretty easy.
It wasn't until recently that you could eat and drink like normal people, right?
That's right. We generally use glucose-based nutrient packs to keep the brain running. But we can absorb nutrients orally now, too. Whatever we eat's broken down by nanomachines, and we have taste sensors as well. It's not exactly like it was before. The difference is, I can turn those sensors off if I don't need them. That's been surprisingly useful.
So cyborgs can live pretty much normal lives now?
Well, getting there. We still need fuel cells and nutrition packs, not to mention regular maintenance. It's a lot of dough. Of course, another big problem's how other people look at you.
How do you mean?
There was a time when I wore artificial skin. Tried to look as close to normal as possible. I've still got some now, on my face. The tech at the time wasn't great. You still looked pretty unnatural. Maybe you could fool someone from far away, but up close, even a baby could tell I wasn't human. Going out shopping or whatever, you could feel all those eyes on you. I tried to find something to do other than fight, but looking like I did got me 2 strikes pretty much as soon as I walked through the door.
That sounds terrible.
Well, you appreciated it when people were honest about it, at least. But when they were too polite to just say so, that was rough. Things are getting better these days, though. Artificial skin's improved a lot. And you don't get so many stares now that the general public knows about cyborgs.
Maybe I should look into the cyborg thing, huh? I could eat whatever I want, whenever I want.
Probably cheaper just getting lipo, Courtney.
Jerk.
Courtney, there's something I'd like your opinion on.
What's up?
It's how I replenish my electrolytes. I'm basically feeding off these cyborgs.
Oh, yeah. That. I don't really see any better options, to be honest. I doubt your old body would have stood up against the Desperado Captains or Jetstream Sam. And if we fail here, it's not only bad for us, but for our clients, and all of Sakumi.
Yeah, you're right.
Besides, it's like you say, no one's forcing them to be here. They chose to throw in with the terrorists.
Yeah.
Look, I won't lie. I don't feel great about it. But in the scheme of things, yes, I think it's justified.
Thanks. I guess it's never black and white in this business, is it?
No. No, it's not. Do you and Kevin work a lot together, Raiden?
Well, Maverick's not that big. Unless you're a short-term contractor, you tend to work with the same guys. Last job we were on together, I was hired by the Carabinieri to track down 3 Albanian mafiosos. They'd fled Italy for Montenegro, and I had to bring them back. It wasn't easy. All 3 of them had cybernetic upgrades. Without Kev, I could have been in serious trouble.
He was with an NGO before Maverick, I think, handling disarmament work for the UN.
Yeah. He and Boris met while working together to resolve a conflict in Africa. They hit it off. So when Boris gave him a job opportunity, he took it.
I kind of wonder why. We're pretty much the opposite of a disarmament outfit.
3 things are needed after a conflict: disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration into society. That's the way it usually goes. I guess Kevin felt like the process was getting to be a joke. Even if the UN taps the group that caused the conflict for post-war cleanup, there's no way of ensuring their sincere cooperation. There's always a chance they'll underreport the number of soldiers they've got on hand.
That, or they only disarm the useless parts of their force. The ones with outdated weapons and gear.
Yeah. Meanwhile, they can hide their standing force, the one with all the up-to-date weaponry, from the UN. Afghanistan saw a lot of that, since the wars were all waged by rival military cliques. Anyway, Kev saw that happening on a daily basis in Africa. Guess he just wanted a job where he had a firmer grasp on what was going on. And then along comes Boris. Kev had to think it over for a while, sure. But, well, here we all are.
PMCs are going to need more people like him. And me too, I guess. You know, civilian viewpoints.
Couldn't agree more.
What's up? No? Did you need anything else?
No, guess not. Just wanted to hear this.
Oh.
Raiden, allow me to give you a recap of visual augment mode.
Why? Is it different from my AR display?
We'll get to that in a moment. Modern tech gives us the ability to display assorted information streams visually. This is accomplished by interrupting the data flow from a cyborg's optic nerves. This is referred to as AR, augmented reality.
That's how I can see my Soliton radar and who I'm talking to on the codec.
Right, but if too much data is presented in this manner, the user runs the risk of having an incomplete view of the real world.
Yeah, the codec window's got a bad habit of getting in the way when you drop in to chat.
Of course, of course. Typically, I'd simply call, leaving it to you whether or not to respond. In an emergency, however, that just wouldn't do.
Define emergency.
Anyway, cyborg AR designers try to keep the interface as unobtrusive as possible. But there are times when one really does need all that data on display. This is where augment mode comes in. Now, I know it sounds a bit like augmented reality, but just think of it as an additional dimension to AR.
Okay, fine. So what's it do?
It uses local soliton radar and XIFF data to do things such as analyze and display enemy position and numbers. It also has a starlight scope and thermal goggle functionality for a host of night vision capabilities. The entire image is digitally processed, making it much easier to read than earlier thermal goggles.
Yeah, I'd noticed that.
Used in a well-lit area, your perceived brightness will be affected, but it won't hinder vision too much. The same type of sensor is used for all functionality. The data sent out by each one is merged together as part of the digital processing. All you need to worry about is turning the individual functions on and off. Simple, yes?
Sure, Doc. Simple.
My apologies, Raiden. I realize we never concluded our discussion on carbon nanotube muscle fibers.
Didn't we?
CNT drove major innovations in the field of cybernetics, not to mention unmanned gears. As I'm sure you are aware, Walker-type UGs require numerous linear actuators in order to function. Previously, organic polymers or cultivated muscle cells were used to that purpose. But the advancement of CNT technology allowed for comparable power in a far more compact package. This meant the same size UGs could be equipped with even greater firepower. Take the redesigned Metal Gear Ray, for example.
They took all the space the old artificial muscles filled up and stuffed it with weapons.
Precisely. Of course, UGs have improved in many ways, all to keep pace with cyborg advancements, you know. After all, the original Metal Gear program was designed to unite infantry and weaponry. As an evolution of this concept, the UG is now in direct competition with the cyborg. And the cyborgs already have an advantage with their maneuverability and smaller size, as you well know. Of course, UGs are not dependent on the skills of a human host.
Long story short, watch out for UGs.
Well, yes, basically. Cyborgs have matched unmanned gears in many respects, but then UG tech advances every day. Do not underestimate any you might run into.
Copy that.
Doc, all the UG talk got me thinking. Why don't we see more manned gears?
Ah, yes, with a pilot. The bipedal tanks and such things, I must confess I have not followed the field closely as of late. But then, who has? Since Metal Gear A, all the advances and the funding in mobile artillery has been UGs.
So why is that?
Well, UGs take many more forms. Aerial drones, treaded tanks, armored transports. And they are perfect for the 3D work. Jobs too dull, too dirty, or too dangerous for men. True Metal Gears with a pilot and nuclear payload were huge and very expensive. They were not practical. It turned out the greater need was for smaller, cheaper units, deployed more easily and in greater numbers. So the field narrowed in on this aspect of gear design, an all-terrain link between infantry and artillery. But even then, the UG models were more popular. In most cases, they simply made more sense.
But aren't there situations where you'd want gear-level power, but also a human pilot there to make decisions? UG AI has gotten better, but it's still terrible at handling anything unexpected.
But Raiden, this is exactly the role the cyborg has taken. On the manned gear, any advantage over a cyborg in offensive power comes with a matching increase in size. This makes it so large as to no longer be practical for most infantry missions. Conversely, the smaller models are so close to cyborgs that, well, what is the point?
Cyborgs are smaller, cheaper, more nimble.
Precisely. Perhaps soon we will see the cyborg take the place of the UG, as the UG has done to the manned gear.
What, with wings? Scooting around on wheels?
Why do you laugh? It is the logical next step to have a human brain integrated into a tank or a plane.
Now you're getting into some B-grade sci-fi territory, Doc.
Oh, but it is all quite possible, I assure you. Just consider the possibilities. A humanoid frame for everyday life, yes, but the brainstem can be easily extracted and inserted into whatever chassis best suits the mission. So, yes, I suppose the paradigm could be flipped on its head. As UGs become smaller and smarter, they could begin to fill the cyborg's role. They will come to resemble them more and more in form and function, no doubt. I suppose at some point they would no longer be UGs, but androids. Glorious!
One thing about fighting these cyborgs, Doctor, it's strange in a way.
Oh? How do you mean?
I can slice them to pieces, and with all their pain and emotion suppressed, they don't feel a thing. At least against SOP troops. You never forgot they were real people. But these cyborgs, it starts to feel like I'm taking on unmanned gears, robots, not living, breathing men.
Intriguing. Tell me, does it help assuage the natural feelings of guilt? There is no reason to avoid this topic. Man has wrestled with it as long as there has been war. Guns were a huge step, of course, as it became easier to take a life, physically and mentally. Then, destroying a tank or airplane, where you no longer had to see your enemy's face as he perished. Eventually, remote-controlled drones further distanced the killer from his victim, much like the video games. I suppose cyborg soldiers could be seen as yet another step in dehumanizing death.
Maybe. I do feel like I could forget I'm taking the lives of real people here.
Well, under normal circumstances, you wouldn't necessarily be taking their lives, strictly speaking. So, as long as the brain is supplied with oxygen, a cyborg can survive most anything, even if respiration is disabled. An emergency supply of liquid oxygen would remain in the bloodstream. The cyborg would enter a state of hibernation, yes. But so long as the brainstem were retrieved intact, it could be attached to another body and revived.
That's how the two Gemini survived.
The Gemini? Ah, yes, the twin cyborgs from the motorcade.
But Desperado cyborgs are different.
Physical self-destruction is a fail-safe security measure. In any case, it is unfortunate that Prime Minister Nmane was human. Perhaps if he had been a cyborg, he might have survived as well.
We'll never know. Besides, a robotic prime minister? I doubt anyone would accept that. Inside or outside the country.
Yes, I suppose fear always does trump logic when it comes to the general public.
Exactly.
Brighton, something I meant to ask in our last chat. Did you consider opting for emotion restraints? I can understand one might be leery of the procedure, but it is all perfectly reversible, I assure you. You could implement them for a mission and then do away with them as soon as it was over.
I'll pass, thanks. To be honest, I have a problem with the whole concept.
And what is that?
Decisions are about more than just logic. Lose your emotions, and you risk not being able to relate to how normal people see right and wrong. Your conscience could end up different, warped, or who knows, maybe gone altogether. Boris agrees. That's why no Maverick cyborgs are allowed to use emotion restraints.
An understandable perspective. There is some data to support your belief. MRI scans have isolated the brain activity associated with choosing between good and bad. Mostly in the dorsolateral. Much of it is similar to cybernetics, you know.
Makes sense. A cyborg's frame is reading signals directly from the brain.
Indeed. Brain tracking employs nanomachines to stop these signals from reaching a normal body. The pilot can then substitute their own signals and control the victim. They can govern all motor movement, but not the victim's thoughts. It is not mind control. More like a puppet. The subject will not move on their own. The pilot must send control signals.
You can't just implant an idea like a hypnotist.
Precisely. You must manipulate them directly. Now, there are several methods for doing this. The pilot can act out the desired behavior and send the resulting electric impulses in real time. For example, the master raises his right hand, the victim does the same. The master says, Arschgeige, and the victim does as well.
Yeah, I get the idea, Doc.
Another method is to set an AI in control as a victim. Less convincing, but less labor-intensive. The AI can access the subject's memory center, at least, to recognize acquaintances and the like.
But anyone looks really closely, and the gig is up.
Mimicking behavior from surface memories is difficult, you know. Quite difficult. AIs are still very poor at replicating more subtle cues, such as the manner of speaking. As a result, often the victim can barely pass as a human, much less any certain individual. With the current tech, a passing acquaintance might be fooled, but not a close friend. Not for long.
Good. The idea of AIs controlling people is bad enough. At least I'll be able to tell if it happens to someone I know. So Doc, if brainjacking can access someone's memory, can't we basically see everything in their past?
Well, that would depend on precisely what you mean by see their past. The brain does not store every single detail the senses take in, you know. It records highlights, further simplified into a highly symbolic form, all to lighten the amount of data. We know how the brain reacts to what it was previously aware of. We can even gauge the emotion provoked. But reproducing memories? No. I've seen little progress in research to this area.
But say we directly linked my brainstem with the nanomachines of a brainjacking victim. Couldn't I read their memories?
There have been attempts at such things, but it is not so simple, you know. The connections between successive memories make up one's identity. If you disturb that, for example, say we remove all memories you have of being yourself and replace them with my own.
Yeah.
You would feel you were the great Dr. Wilhelm Vogt. You would behave very similar to how I do. However, what if instead you kept your own memories and we added mine to them? You would feel you were both Raiden and Wilhelm Vogt. Suddenly your memories would not lead one to the next. You would be confused, disoriented, without a sense of which man you were, and thus how you should behave. So, you see, the very concept is not practical for most military applications. In trying to read an enemy's mind, you would, in a sense, become that enemy.
You wouldn't know which side you were fighting for.
Precisely. Cyborg memories are completely different, of course. A cyborg's visuals are often monitored by outside parties, much as we do with yours. This visual data can, of course, be recorded for later analysis. All with full video and all in the holographic memory in their left hands.
So you can just sit back and enjoy the movie?
Well, it's not always recorded, mind you. And even then, there's the issue of locating the desired data buried inside all that video. You might need to comb 10 days of recordings from 10 cyborgs to find a single person or document. That is 100 days of work. Even replayed double speed, 50 days.
Can't you automate the search?
Of course. You can flag any time a certain face appears or if certain words are said. But the process is not perfect, and it still requires time, you know. Besides which, often one doesn't know what they are searching for until they find it. But should you ever require a search through your memory, Raiden, I would be happy to assist you.
Yeah, for a modest fee, I'm sure. I have to say, Doc, it's almost scary everything nanomachines are capable of. SOP, brainjacking.
Oh, but the cyborg is capable of even more.
You think?
I do. With nanomachines. You know this name has always bothered me, nanomachine. They are much more than smaller versions of existing machines. So much more. You cannot just take a motor and make it all teeny tiny, you know? A human chromosome is 10 micrometers long, roughly. A nanometer is 1/100th that length. These devices must be crafted at the molecular level to work at that scale. It is far more to do with molecular biology than mechanical engineering.
Okay, Doc, but where are you going with it?
It is, however, now possible to create proteins that simulate viral functions, effectively fooling natural human cells into taking on a wide range of less conventional characteristics, boosting strength or resilience or even regenerative ability. Not to CNT muscle fiber levels, of course. After all, these molecules and proteins can only make use of the materials at hand. That is to say, the atoms that naturally occur within the human body.
I'm not sure I follow. Are you saying cyborg tech is already more advanced than nanomachines?
Well, not necessarily. But the potential for future growth seems much greater, does it not? Natural means can only rearrange what is already there. Boost one ability too far, and you might take away from another. if the human race is to truly evolve, I believe we must shed this DNA-driven organic flesh and exchange it for something far more functional. Cyborg technology seems better suited to this purpose, at least in terms of military applications. But then, who knows? A revolution in nanotechnology could be occurring even as we speak. Progress rarely takes the form we expect, you know. Such is the great frustration and glory of science.
Doc, I'm seeing Desperado cyborgs explode here after I take them down.
For security purposes, I would imagine. Cyborgs often use classified tech from suppliers who take great pains to maintain their trade secrets. Most likely, these models have a self-destruct failsafe that triggers once they cannot defend themselves.
So they die even though their brains could be transferred to a new body?
I understand your concern, Raiden, but I'm sure these conditions were clearly stated in their contracts. This is one area that is well regulated by the law. PMCs must inform their workers of such things. These men knew the danger when they signed up. No doubt they were compensated for the additional risk.
Right.
You should be more concerned with the potential for data loss in these explosions. They could damage or even erase the holographic memory in their left hands. Though to think on it, the data is most likely automatically wiped before detonation, just in case it would survive the explosion and resulting shockwave, you know.
Yeah. Sure, Doc.
You must remove the hands before their critical system shutdown sequence can activate. Remember it this way. Before you kill, make certain no cyborg is left with a left hand. Raiden, have I told you of the research I was conducting before we met?
Several times.
It was the Cold War. East Germany. The DDR. My field was infantry weapon research. It was a magical time. Secret research. Top secret, you know. All for the Soviets, but so exciting. I was free to explore wherever my findings took me. I never had a budget request refused. Not once. I was young then. Working, always working. Most nights I would sleep under my desk, you know. Call it nostalgie, but East Germany wasn't so bad. Nostalgie being German for East nostalgia, of course.
Of course.
Yes, the bureaucracy had its problems. But my colleagues, the discoveries. Well, in any case, after unification, they suddenly shut down our entire facility. Everything I'd worked for, my job, my research, poof, gone just like that.
Sounds rough.
I've often said I would be a homeless vagrant if myoelectric prosthesis hadn't lent me a hand. Artificial limbs were crude props then, you know, designed only for appearances. They were hardly functional. If you lost an arm or leg, you were disabled, and that was that. The key was running actuators based on electromyography signals from the skin's surface, of course. This enabled a great range of movement, even more so than a natural limb. It was then I realized my knowledge of robotics and engineering could come in handy. So, I contacted a prosthesis laboratory in Dortmund, and I was hired immediately. Patents filed in my name made quite a bit of money, you know. Soon I was made the head of my own lab.
And that's when you started filling orders from PMCs.
Indeed. From contractors who'd been referred by their employers, to be exact. Workers from your industry quickly became our best customers. We were flooded with orders. But my field was never full body conversions. You can imagine my surprise when Boris contacted me.
Yeah. Our previous cybernetics maintenance guy went into hiding.
But I built on my knowledge and now consider myself an expert on all cyborgs, both partial and full body.
Glad I could help with your on-the-job training. Seriously, though, we're lucky to have you on board.
Yes, I should think we have both benefited from our arrangement. Which reminds me, do not forget our other arrangement. The cyborg's left hands, if you would.
Got it.
Raiden, are you fully versed in the features of your AR display? It can serve many functions, you know.
Do I hear un lecture?
A lecture? No, of course not. Of course I know the first practical application of the technology was for aircraft HUDs. Then head-mounted displays, HMDs. The data could be seen even as the viewer moved their head. As the technology improved, it was integrated into retinal imaging, contact lenses. Soon it became standard issue not just for pilots, but infantry soldiers as well. Of course, with cyborgs such as yourself, the data can be fed directly to the optic nerve.
No lecture, huh? Anyway, there's more to my augmented reality than just upgraded HMD tech.
Of course there is, Dummkopf. You did not let me finish.
Oh, you weren't finished?
AR is a much broader concept. It is more a design concept than a particular imaging methodology. It encompasses HUDs, HMDs, any and all manner of visual real-time data overlay. Though recently, some reserve the AR label for virtual objects the subject can both see and touch. For example, your codec menu and zoom slider. Such objects do not exist anywhere in the real world, not even as images. They are fed directly to your optic nerve, so only you can see them. Yet, when you interact with them, sensory feedback is delivered to the nerves in your fingers. It gives you the sense of touching a thing that does not exist.
Beats lugging around a sat radio and giant scope, that's for sure.
There is another school of thought on precisely what constitutes AR.
Seriously, more of this?
It defines AR as anything which obscures the boundary between reality and that experienced by the viewer.
Well, how would that be different from VR?
Well, for example, let's say that you and I are having a nice chat face to face. Suddenly, I disappear. Poof! And in my place appears a ravishing, nubile young woman. Is the girl the projected image or the reality? Perhaps I was the AR. How would you know?
The accent might be a clue.
Ah, such things can be controlled with a simple hack of your auditory nerves.
Well, that's comforting. So how is this different from VR again?
Well, I suppose, strictly speaking, it is rather similar. Both are a method for completely fooling the senses, rather than simply augmenting them. Although, technically it would be MR, mixed reality, since there are some real elements involved. Yes, of course, that would be the distinction and the correct term. In any case, the advance of MR technology leads to many interesting philosophical questions. What happens when appearances cease to have meaning? It is no longer see it to believe it, after all. It could make for a great advance in cyborg acceptance, you know. They could project a perfectly normal human body to be seen by anyone who can perceive MR.
I don't know. Sounds like it might cause more problems than it'd solve to me. Hey Doc, what can you tell me about the carbon nanotubes used in artificial muscles? I know they're the real key behind the proliferation of cyborgs, but...
Well, a carbon nanotube, or CNT, is a sheet of carbon graphite formed like a tube. They range from 50 nanometers in diameter all the way down to under 1 nanometer. 1 nanometer, you recall, is one billionth of a meter. Quite small. As you've likely seen, the carbon atoms that make up the sheet are organized in a 6-point ring shape. These hexagonal structures are connected to each other along their edges.
Sort of like a soccer ball.
Precisely. Such structures are known as Buckminster fullerene. CNTs were discovered by accident while scientists were researching other fullerenes. CNTs have assorted properties, each with the potential to drive vast leaps in industrial technology. Consider, for example, that the conducting properties and resistance to strong currents far outclass copper. They have great mechanical strength and can be shaped into incredibly thin form factors, all of which can directly contribute to improving integrated circuits. Furthermore, the atomic links in sp2 carbon are the strongest of all types of atoms. Its tensile strength is greater than even diamond. All that, and its weight is only half that of aluminum. It is also quite elastic, making it ideal for bomb-proofing vehicles, buildings, and other structures.
Sounds like some kind of wonder material.
There have been numerous plans drawn up for orbital elevators in the past. The problem being that no material was strong enough to make them practical. CNTs make such dreams one step closer to reality. You can change their structures by using the right power voltage, and they can withstand temperatures between -190 and +1500 degrees centigrade. They feature a large surface area and an empty space within the tube. This allows for such things as fuel and catalysts to be stored inside. It's that particular trait which has enabled the development of fuel cell-infused artificial muscles.
Straight out of sci-fi, huh?
Well, truth is stranger than fiction. Science fiction, even. Scientists are currently expanding upon all of CNT's uses. But it has taken a fair amount of time since their discovery for practical implementations to pop up. Historically, mass manufacture was deemed too difficult, the costs astronomical.
Practical manufacturing methods were established in the early 2010s, but the Patriots hushed that up.
Indeed. And now that it's out in the wild, we are finally well and truly in the carbon nanotube age. You must continue along, Raiden. Check your destination on the Soliton radar.